course. So my name's Leah Charles-King. Before we get stuck in, I will just do a bit of housekeeping here for you. So first of all, welcome. Thank you for being here today. We are here to discuss suicide prevention in minoritized ethnic communities. Now, it has been part of the Suicide Prevention Month, a series of webinars that Bipolar UK have been hosting, which have been going, very well. And I hope it's been creating a lot of awareness around the subject. Now, these webinars do discuss suicide. So if you need to leave the webinar at any stage, please feel free to do so. And you can watch later via our website. Now, you will not be able to unmute your microphone during the session, nor turn on the video during the session either. And for these webinars, our chat function is off as questions have been pre-submitted via our e-community. And if you'd like more support during or after today's webinar, please email our peer support team at info@bipolaruk.org. Today's webinar will be recorded. We will upload the recording to our website and we will send it out to all registered attendees after the event. And if you or someone you care about needs some urgent support or help, we have actually created a list of crisis support resources, which you can find at bipolaruk.org/crisis-support. And you can also email as well. I think it's info@bipolaruk.org. Okay, so here we are. It's a beautiful Tuesday morning for me. Well, it's raining. I'm in the Caribbean at the moment. No complaints from me, but I've obviously got people from hopefully around the globe and certainly back in the UK, in London. So as I mentioned, I'm Leah Charles-King. For those who don't know me, I am a proud Bipolar UK ambassador. And in fact, just got back from Iceland, I think a week ago, where I was speaking at the International Bipolar, I could never say this right. It's the International ISBD, International Societies of Bipolar Disorders. So it's a big conference. And I was invited to share my lived experience in the hope that it creates change. So, and I did that on behalf of Bipolar UK, representing the charity, which is always an honor. But it was incredible actually to be around people who are doing the research, doctors, psychiatrists, people who are really about this life and really about trying to find out more about bipolar and how it works and how it affects us all, because it's all very, very different. So now this topic is close to my heart because many of you may have heard my story and the fact that I had gone to my doctors, my GPs many times, and I said, look, I feel that I've got bipolar, I'm certainly unwell, and it was misdiagnosed for many years. I was told that I didn't look bipolar, I was told that I didn't act it, I was told that I was too articulate, I was told that it was in my head, I was told that I can put up with the pain and just get on with it, and to be honest with you, it got to that point where things became very bleak. It was very dark because I had nowhere else to go. If I'm going to my primary caregivers and they're telling me, no, it's all in your head, then where do I go from there? And then I had the other side of things, which is the taboo or the stigma of mental illness within, the Black community. And I know I'm sure Swagata will agree with me as well, in the South Asian community, especially, our communities are quite similar in terms of we hide these things, we minimize these things. It's embarrassment, it's taboo, you don't talk about this stuff, it's stigma, it's not believed, it could be spiritual, so many different things. And so what happens is that leads us, many of us in the Black and brown communities, to not want to speak, to not speak up. And actually, usually we don't even access help until crisis point, if that, which means that suicide rates are being driven higher and higher. And that's across the board, but certainly within minoritized ethnic communities. I mean, the stats are getting higher and higher. In fact, I will have to give some stats here just so we can build some context, and then I'm going to introduce my panel. Now, I do want to say that suicide prevention is a collective effort, of course, and today we're focusing on minoritized ethnic communities who are disproportionately impacted by mental health challenges and systemic barriers. So in a recent Bipolar UK survey, 90% of respondents told us that they had experienced suicidal thinking in the past 12 months. 90% of people who answered this survey by Bipolar UK said in the past 12 months, it had crossed their mind. I'm just taking that in for a minute, because even for me, during 12 months, there's probably been a moment where it's crossed my mind too. I'll never sit here and lie to you guys. I know the levels to it for me, because I've been in the darkest depths, and I've had to be saved by friends and stopped in my tracks. And in fact, how I got diagnosed was by writing my GP a suicide note in the end, because they wouldn't listen to me. And that was literally my call to action that day if I didn't get help. But you see, I find that suicide thinking, it could just pop into your mind at any time. It doesn't, even though, you know, I am very well, but there could be a period of time where things get so low or something feels so heavy, and then you just hear that voice going, oh, just better off without being here. You'd be better off if you wasn't here. That is part of suicide thinking, whether I would like to admit it or not. That little thought in the mind. Of course, now, if I continue thinking it, and if I start making a plan, this is a major issue, okay? And this is crisis point, and this is where I need help. I'm just sharing with you at a time where in the last 12 months, based upon 90% of respondents told Bipolar UK they thought about it. I hold my hands up, I was probably one of those people. Also, a stat here, Black people in the UK are 4 times more likely to be sectioned under the Mental Health Act. That's something that I don't know if you know, but it's quite common for me to know this, and it's very scary. Approximately 15 to 20% of people with bipolar disorder die by suicide, with 30 to 60% making at least one attempt. One study found that Black individuals with bipolar have a higher lifetime prevalence of suicide attempts compared to white individuals. And there is also data from Bipolar UK's own survey for the Mental Health Act. Though it's not suicide specific, in the survey, 33% of respondents from minority ethnic backgrounds experienced racial discrimination while receiving mental health care, and 50% felt that services were not culturally appropriate. I could definitely wholeheartedly agree with that. I feel like, again, I was one of those people that were just sort of dismissed based upon medical racism grounds. We know it exists, but these are the realities that we're confronting, and it's why we are here today. So we must create more awareness, address the stigma, and break down the barriers that prevent people like us from seeking the help that we deserve. It's not just the help we need, it's the help that we deserve. We deserve it just as much as anybody else, and we shouldn't allow society or people or individuals tell us otherwise. It's unfair, and that's how these systemic barriers continue, you know? So one of the biggest challenges we face in addressing suicide prevention is the stigma, as I mentioned, around mental health, particularly within minoritized ethnic communities. There's also the harsh reality of medical racism, as I mentioned, where people are often dismissed or stereotyped by their healthcare professionals. And statistics show that people from minoritized ethnic groups, particularly Black and South Asian people, don't often access these services until we're in crisis point. But the question is why? You know, these dismissals just make you feel unseen and unheard, and ultimately it leaves us more vulnerable, doesn't it? It leaves us more vulnerable, and that's why the suicide rates are going up. So let me introduce my panel. I should have on the line Swagata Sen. Swagata, hello, my love. She is from, well, you're from London, right?
Originally from India, but based in London now.
Yeah. Okay, originally from India, and then you came to good old Blighty.
I came to do my master's in Warwick in 2008, so it's been 16 years now, this year, September.
And as a South Asian woman, how have you found the experience in the context of what we're talking about here? Have you always felt seen? Have you felt heard? Or when you first came to the UK, was that one of the first times maybe where the color of your skin really meant something? Because I find when I'm in the Caribbean, I never have to think about the color of my skin. I'm born and bred in the UK, and yet that's the place where I have to think about, or I'm reminded every day that I'm a Black woman. Every day, whether it's social media, TV, politics, current affairs, I'm reminded every day that I'm a Black woman. But when I'm in the Caribbean, it's never such a thing. How was it for you coming to the UK?
My experience is actually slightly different. So, to your question had a couple of parts in it. So, in terms of getting a diagnosis and all of that, there was a lot of dismissals, a lot of lack of understanding of what's going through. I didn't necessarily feel like that was down to the color of my skin. I just felt because I was quite young, and my background, I didn't go to school here, so I didn't have the type of school reports that, for example, you would have. So those kind of things being an impediment. I actually, and this is gonna seem extremely privileged, and I'm very aware of that because growing up in India, at that time coming to the UK and getting somebody to help me with the tuition fees and all of that and navigating all of that, I actually left India because I felt so marginalized and I felt so alone and I felt so stigmatized because of my mental health issues. So for me, it was about finding my place into a territory where things were not so much of a taboo. My life has been hugely impacted by, say, Western literature, cinema, theater, television, etc. And of course, I don't think in the UK we are so much at par with the Americans are, but
Mm.
watching those shows and stuff where people just normally talk about having a therapist, they just
It's so normal.
casually mention.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what really drew me to the whole Caucasian culture. They seemed way more open to talk about, and just say that, okay, this is just an illness. It wasn't related to shame. It wasn't related to feelings of inadequacy. It wasn't because you are weird and you should just be, you should just shut up because you're so lucky in life because you've got an amazing house and amazing facilities and amazing luxuries. It wasn't any of that. I found a voice. And of course, it took ages to find the right therapist and finally get a diagnosis. But in my case, it a lot of the minimizing and the dismissals actually went away when I moved here. So in that way, it was really lucky.
That's incredible. So you found that back home in India, you were being dismissed a lot more, and these symptoms, obviously, that you had were viewed, obviously, in that way that I just expressed a bit earlier, of the taboo within our community. So you were just seen as weird. You were seen as the strange person, the person with the issues,
Problem child,
problem child.
always getting into trouble at
Yeah.
school. I mean, the thing is, this might sound shocking, but my very early memory of just not wanting to be here.
Mm.
That's how I said it to them. It was 5 or 6. That's my earliest memory of just wanting to disappear and feeling so lonely. And don't get me wrong, my parents are incredible, my family is incredible, and they've grown so much since my diagnosis, and they've learned so much more. My mum's a counselor. She started the journey before I got diagnosed. Everything was there, but in those years, those early years, it was a very lonely experience. Nobody understood me as a child. I moved from school to school because my dad was a civil servant and he moved with his job. So I was moving around. I couldn't put down roots anymore. I was literally seen as the problem child everywhere I went. And this one thing was constantly thrown in my face. Oh, but you're so lucky. You've got everything, you don't have to, you're not wanting for anything in life and all of that. And nobody understood that those things just didn't matter. It was incredibly isolating and stigmatizing. My earliest attempts at taking my life was when I was 12. I poured phenyl over my breakfast and I was going to have it. And my sister saw it and she told my mum, and my mum didn't know what to do. So,
What is that? Like some kind of poison or?
yeah, it's like a domestos, it's like
Right,
toilet cleaner, just really
right.
concentrated chemical. And I still remember the stench of that to this date whenever I talk about that. And it became a case of silent treatment because nobody knew what to do. and nobody at school could help me. My own parents were clueless, and things are slightly improving in India now, but there's a lot of misunderstanding. Nobody knew how to help me. And I
Mm,
realized, because I went through university, and that itself was a very difficult process, um, because of other circumstances. But I then, at one point, I just realized, and this is thanks to my mom and dad, this is like when I was backed into a corner. I had nowhere to go. I had to say, right, I have to fend for myself, but not before I made one other attempt, just through my university years, where I took a bunch of sleeping pills. And again, it was a familiar line. I lived with extended family, and they thought that I was just doing this for attention, and I just wanted, no sort of challenges to my behavior. And they didn't realize how much I didn't just want to be there, because none
mm,
of this mattered. Anything that stopped the pain, I
anything.
was desperate for that. Anything. And at that time, this anything was everything.
Yes. First of all, thank you for sharing that part of your story with us, because it's not easy. It really isn't. And as you're speaking, I'm remembering parts of mine. And when you said there, you would have done anything to just get rid of the pain. That's exactly how I felt. It's exactly the same. You hear people say it's very selfish to take your own life. What a selfish thought. And any times I cried out back then, people would say to me, "Oh, but think about your little nephews. Think about, it's this guilt that I'd be given rather than help, rather than trying
Yeah.
to understand what was going on in my mind. I would just be given guilt trips instead. And it was nothing to do with my little nephews or my family, whatever. It was everything. And the pain was so immense, to wake up with the pain, to go to sleep with the pain, to walk around every minute of the day with the pain. Like you say, you just wanted it to stop. And I had very similar situations. I don't feel like anybody really wants to take their life. I don't believe that at all. I believe that the pain gets so immense and the lies get so loud that you just feel like it's the only way. This has to somehow, stop. So what would you say then was the has been the biggest challenge for you? Because you were obviously suffering for many years, and what you got diagnosed about, was it 8 years ago or something? Or
Yeah, I got diagnosed just before my 30th birthday.
wow.
And when I came across that statistic that it takes about 10-15 years to get diagnosed, I was like bang on, because that's exactly what happened. I still remember I used to read these books. I've always loved reading, and I used to read a lot of books on like different mental health issues and stuff. And I remember reading it in school, and I always could identify with some of the symptoms. And I remember I was reading this book where it was describing bipolar as seeming like, there are coins dropping constantly in your head, or like your mind being like a sieve, or like this hyperventilation that you need to do. And you've got all
Mm,
this crazy energy, and then you do. And for me, I mostly suffered from hypomania and stuff like that. I found all that so relatable, but I couldn't take it to anybody. When I took it to a
mm,
teacher, they just said, no, it's a very serious illness. And I was like, okay. And then I still remember I got diagnosed, and my mum's first reaction, and this is so, I think anybody and everybody in our communities will be able to relate to it. My mum said, come back home, come back to India. I don't trust the diagnosis. I think it's a very loose diagnosis. I think the doctors there probably just think you are. They're not aware of our culture. They're not aware of our struggles. Come back to India. And I just shut down on her. I told my sister, and again, like I said before, my mom's come a very long way, and she's super
mm.
supportive and super educated now. But it's important to talk about this without
Yeah,
feeling like I'm, vilifying my mom. The truth is, in
yeah,
that moment, she was completely ignorant, even
yes,
though she was a counselor in training and stuff. She just thought that this is just something that affects white people. You
yeah.
don't get it. Our culture is different. All this is like wishy-washy, and it's all going to get better if I just go back to my mom, and she's going to take care of me.
It's so, again, so relatable, that our stories, although myself as Caribbean descendant and yourself as somebody directly coming from India, as we already discussed at the beginning, our taboos are very much the same. And again, I can spot on relate. I remember knowing at this point, okay, this is bipolar, and I was just, you know, getting my GPs to kind of start being convinced. I was convinced. I knew this what it was, and I approached my parents, and the exact same thing. It's in your head. We don't get things like that, and it was all completely shut down. It was all completely minimized. And from that day, I never spoke to them about it again. I got more and more and more unwell. And my partner at the time kept going to them saying, you know, Leah's very unwell. I'm very afraid. I'm afraid she's going to take her life. And they were just so dismissal. And in fact, they got very, what's the word? They took it very personally. How dare you tell us? You know, we're parents, we know our child. How dare you tell us that our child has a mental illness? And they took absolute deep offense. And actually, again, it's part of my story. I've been very open with it. My parents, what I would say, abandoned or completely dismissed me. And we were ostracized for years because as far as they was concerned, this bipolar thing she talks about is her situation. She needs to deal with that. We'll look into that when we're ready. But right now, we're not really believing it. And so I was left for quite some time alone. But like you said, it's so important that we speak about this openly because my parents have very much improved. They get it now. I mean, we're talking years on, but it's taken a long time. And again, it's in our culture not to vilify our parents. It's in our culture to ever say a bad word about our parents. Doesn't matter what they do to us. That is in our culture. We don't do that publicly. We do not speak bad of our parents. So it's very difficult to be able to speak openly, even among each other, and go, yeah, my parents weren't there for me. They didn't really believe this bipolar thing. But at the same time, it's very important that representation, that we speak our truth, because if we don't, how will that help other people who look just like us? Because they will carry the same guilt. Again, it's very much within our communities.
And it's sort of the dichotomy, isn't it? It is sort of recognizing that your parents or your family, whoever it is, like ultimately it was my sister who convinced my mum that she needs to dial down her concerns about all of this and just accept it. This from the same person who once just blurted out in a party, my sister, who didn't have the understanding then, and she just told my friends one day, oh yeah, why did you try to take your life? She just casually dropped it in a conversation one day. My sister had, and I was gobsmacked, and I've never challenged her about it and stuff. But you know, but look at the amount of work that she's done since then. I don't like in our family, we have a very big culture of being open and honest and giving feedback, because if you don't, and this I've learned from my son's school, if you don't kindly challenge behavior patterns and mistakes by calling it out, do it kindly. I'm talking about it. I'm not vilifying my mom today. I'm talking from a point of recognition that my mom didn't know how to help. She was working off of a template.
But now she does.
But now she does, and my sister does. And I've got this amazing support system within my family, not to mention my amazing friends and professionals who help me. But they've evolved, and they've evolved because I've been able to, when I was feeling well, you know, and for me, this is what I meant, that I sought refuge in just exiting my culture, the ignorance in my culture. And I said, right, I'm going to go amidst people who understand it, who talk about it openly. I'm going to learn how they do it and why they do it better than us. And then I'm going to try and implement that. And there's been a slow trickle. But in my case, it's really, really worked. You know, my husband, he didn't have a lot of idea either, but he's worked his way up. And my whole family is just, they've blossomed into these wonderful, amazing, understanding people, starting from a complete point of denial. Oh no, what is that? You know, you don't have it. It's all in your head sort of situation. So I'm very proud of them as well. But it started from admitting that they didn't have it right.
Yeah. And I think that is the key thing. I think from, you know, the parents admitting it and us as their children admitting it wasn't right in the beginning. It was terrible, but we have come such a long way. And I think that is really important that we say that we're not vilifying our parents. You know, I have such a great relationship with my parents now, probably better than I ever had in my entire, not probably, it is better than I ever had in my entire life. You know, I hang out with my parents now. We holiday together. You know, I'm an adult. I don't need to do these things anymore, you know, but I do, and I enjoy it. we have a much better relationship than we did when I was growing up, because there was a lack of understanding, a lack of respect, a lack of boundaries, and all of those things. And I think now that those elements are put into place, it really can show that a family can be transformed, and actually you can find and build that support network within your family, and it doesn't need to be all doom and gloom or all the stereotypes. So thank you, Swagata, for sharing that. I will come back to you with some of the questions from our e-community. I want to bring May Ladd into the conversation now. How you doing, May?
I'm fine, thank you. Yeah, thanks. Nice to meet all of you. Thanks, Leah, for inviting me to this this session.
Yeah, no, really happy to have you. I know you have gone through a tough time in quite a short space of time. I read your bio, you know, sort of 2000, it all seemed to have kicked off for you, for use of a better term, in terms of, you know, your sort of battle with bipolar symptoms, and, you know, the breakdown of your relationship and things like that. You had a business. So it sounds like there was just a lot of pressure on you at that time. Are you happy to just share some of that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So in 2020, I separated from my wife. I left the house. I've got two children. In March, I was taken to hospital. Um, didn't know exactly what happened to me, but it was then diagnosed as bipolar, a mania event. I lost my father same year. He died of a stroke. He was 85. Struggling with my business, with COVID, lost some business in the Middle East, Far East, and even in the UK and Europe. Mother went into depression because my father's passed away, and we had COVID. So everything happened in 2020. It was like a big earthquake. So all things happened together. All the buses came at the same time. One of my issues was actually denial. I challenged the doctors to say that I don't have bipolar, and they can write down suspected bipolar rather than bipolar. I didn't want to admit to it, and I didn't know where it come from. What happened? I have an issue because I think what Swagata said around the community. My father was one of the founders of the Indian community in the UK in the 1960s. He was an educated man. He helped set up the community across the UK. He was a very prominent man. He gave 30 plus years of charity and community services whilst working in Bradford and Huddersfield in Yorkshire. He was a colour chemist. So he was mixing dyes for the textile industry, which was quite strong in the north of England back in the 60s and 70s. My shame was actually, well, it is shame. I felt I've actually dragged my whole family's name down. I've tarred my father's name, and he's got a very strong name in the UK. He's done so much for the community. And I feel I let my children down. I'd let my wife down. I'd let down my father. My father passed away. I let my mother down, and I've let the wider community down. I should have been a better, upstanding individual to take forward the torch effectively from my father. But what I've done instead is actually I've shamed the family and brought the family name down. And as Swagata will understand, probably yourself as well, Leah, the family name, you know, is in community. It is quite important to have the right standing and the right responsibility and the right level of you know, status. I think it's a lot to do with status, and you know, anything that impacts that is a really big taboo subject. So that's in a nutshell what's happened to me. I've been in and out of hospital for 3 years with mania due to high stress and high work. I have been at the bottom of the valley as well with regards to suicidal thoughts over the last 2-3 years. I think one of the things that kept me moving or tried to get me out of that is just to think and focus about my children and see that I'd like them to have respect for me And for them, I don't want to let them down. They've both luckily been very supportive. My daughter is a medical student, so she's been very helpful. My ex-wife actually is a pharmacist and actually has been also helpful with bipolar support. So I've had some medical support from within the family. My mum couldn't cope. She was struggling her own battles and demons with having lost her husband. And having to then live alone in Bradford. So she was struggling. I was struggling. So yeah, it's been a difficult 3-4 years.
Yeah, I mean, again, thank you, because what you're going through is still quite raw. You know, I lost my grandmother suddenly in 2020, and 2020 for all of us was catastrophic in many ways, right? We lost people, we had COVID. But for you, everything just happened at once, like you said, and in such a condensed space of time. Like, I really, really feel for you. And like I said, when I read your bio, I just thought, good for you that you're still here and you're still, you know, fighting on, and you're doing that. You're even in something like this, a conference like this, because 4 years in to my journey, I was still in my shame and my stigma era, and I was not, nobody knew about it. So the fact that you're here and being able to speak publicly, I'm just like, take my hat off to you. I mean, look, there's no timings. It doesn't matter whether it's 4 years or 10 years or anything like that, but just, I'm just putting myself in your shoes and just going, wow, good for you. Can I ask you a question though? Do you realize that those things aren't your fault, and that actually bipolar can happen to anyone?
Yeah, I think when it was diagnosed in 2020, I just challenged it and I said, no, I don't have that. I've just been unwell. But then I accepted it maybe about a year after that. So in 2021. And then because I accepted it, I was in depression actually for 3 years. You know, so I accepted it, but I didn't enjoy taking injections or taking drugs. I'm an anti-drug man, even though I was married to a pharmacist. So I learned to eventually accept it in the last 2-3 years. And then I learned through hospital actually that they provided a routine at the hospital in Bradford, Yorkshire. I was probably lucky that I was put into a private hospital because they didn't have enough beds in the normal hospital, in the NHS hospital.
Wow.
And the private hospital, I was in there for 8 weeks this April. And for that 8 weeks, I didn't realize what I was doing for 4 weeks. I was on a drip feed because I wasn't eating for 4 days. So probably heading towards death. However, the next 4 weeks, after the first 4 weeks, I got out of that and started exercising and started to change my focus. But yeah, I think they provided me a routine, you know, watching yoga, meditation, a yoga room, making smoothies, doing activities, having therapists one-to-one. So they provided a lot of good infrastructure to help my diagnosis. And what I've done since leaving hospital in May is I've been able to implement a routine-based life with relaxation, with walks in the park, with limiting the amount of work I do, so I don't get stressed. Reaching out to my good friends and family. I have very good supportive friends like Swagata does in Yorkshire. I have my school friends. They take me on the walks to the Yorkshire Dales and the Lake District, which is all on hand here. So I've been lucky. And my London friends also have been very helpful because I tend to split my time between London and Bradford.
Because your lifestyle sounds like, you know, you have a lot going on, you run businesses, etc. And again, I can really relate to that and the pressures that come with that. And I feel like a good part of your mental health journey, the journey towards wellness, is that management. When I got the diagnosis, I wasn't given any form of psychoeducation or management tips or anything like that. I literally was given this diagnosis, a bag of pills you know, like a cocktail of drugs, and I was sent about my way. I didn't know what bipolar was. I didn't know how it would affect me, and I was very, very desperate. So the journey that you have, you know, where you're telling me you're at within 4 years, I'm like, wow, because I still didn't know that stuff within 4 years of my diagnosis. I didn't. It took me years to really, like you say, accept the diagnosis. I find that the acceptance is key, because the denial just stops us from getting better. It's just no point denying it. It is what it is. Now, I'm not saying we have to accept it and sort of succumb to bipolar and say, well, this is me now. I am now bipolar and bipolar is me. You know, but actually, no, it's like, I accept that I've got this. Like, I accept when I have a headache or a migraine and I decide, you know, okay, I'm going to take a paracetamol, drink some water and go and get some rest. I know what to do when I have that ailment. So it's the same, in my opinion, when it comes to bipolar symptoms. You know, when those sort of symptoms can play, if I'm a bit crabby because I haven't got enough sleep, for example, I know, right, okay, tonight I've really got to get to bed early. These are the things I didn't know before, those management skills, you know. So before we move on to Professor Femi, I just wanted to ask you, May, what do you think has been the biggest challenge for you within all of this, and, you know, particularly at your lowest points?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge was just trying to get through a whole day, you know, waking up and then having breakfast and then effectively deactivating myself, effectively lying down, watching silly programs on TV throughout the whole day, doing nothing, not calling anybody, not speaking to anybody, not even going for a walk, not bathing, not making any food. I lived on takeaway for 6 months in London. You know, I didn't bathe either. And I think that was the lowest point where I effectively shut down. And I didn't know how to get out of it. And I didn't want to ask for help because I didn't want to bring shame to the family or my friends. And I didn't want to look weak. One of the problems we find, I think, maybe with men is that we don't speak about things. We don't want to show that we are weak. We amongst friends and family and community. It's a sign of weakness if you start to air the fact that you've got issues in your head or you're psychotic. Because some people label it as mental health. Others will label it saying, well, actually, you're mad. There's, you know, there's something wrong in your head.
Yeah.
And they label different things.
Yeah, it's like you can't be trusted. You can't be the man of the house or the head of the household. Suddenly you become weak and diminished. And that's not true at all, because bipolar can happen to absolutely anybody. And it doesn't make any of us weak. But exactly what you say, I felt very similar to that. It's like the embarrassment of, oh my God, everyone's going to think I'm a liability. I would never work again. My thing was my career. That's what it's always been, my career, and how things look because of all the hard work I put in and having to feel like I've got to work 10 times harder as a Black woman. And so for me, I certainly didn't want anybody to think, oh my goodness, now she's a liability. She's not going to show up for work. She's not going to be able to do her job. And these were all the things that I could do, and particularly that I had to do in my mind, because I was just ashamed of the alternative. And I think this is a great time to actually bring in Professor Femi Oyebode. He is an absolute legend in this game, and I'm happy that he's here. Hiya, Professor Femi. How are you doing?
Very well. Thank you very much, Leah.
It's wonderful to see you again. I know that I featured in your BBC4 radio documentary, Is Psychiatry Working?
That's right. That's right.
I've heard so much good stuff about that. I have people coming up to me all the time going, I heard you on this series. I think it had a major impact. How did, the feedback for you, how did you find it?
Well, I think, as you say, it seemed to have had quite a good impact. And the BBC commissioned a second series, which was aired earlier this year, and we're in talks about whether they'll do a third series. So I think, yeah, you are right to say that it did seem to have a good effect.
Yeah, it really did. I not to say that I doubted you at all, but I was very surprised at the ripple of where it went. People that I didn't even expect to have been listening to something like that. So thank you again for doing that, because I think it made a massive, massive impact. And also thank you for including me and asking me to be a part of that as well. It's very much an honor. So just listening there to May, you know, speaking, and just saying he didn't want to appear as weak or as a burden, or, you know, as the man of the house, the man of the family. We know very much within Black and Asian communities and Black and brown communities, that's sort of our sort of mantle, isn't it? That we present ourselves in a certain way. What were you thinking as you listened to May, and of course, Swagata.
Yes, Swagata.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
What were your thoughts as you were hearing them speak?
Well, I mean, I think obviously the first thing to say is very, very moving, isn't it? It's an honor to hear people talk about these matters, which we very rarely hear people talk about honestly in public. So very, very moving accounts, really. I think that one of the things that came across to me most powerfully was the idea of shame. And we don't talk enough about shame. And we don't talk enough about how shame is related to suicidal thinking, and how it also makes suicide acts much more likely. And so we talk about the links between despair and hopelessness, but we don't say very much about how one of the things you said, Leah, was about pain, and an American writer who wrote about his own experience of depression, William Styron, he uses the word psychalgia, which is his word for saying neuralgia is a pain that comes from nerves. Yes. And he you know, he coined this word psychalgia, and which is a way of trying to tell us how painful depression can be. And once you've understood how painful it can be, you then understand that somebody trying to get rid of that they may be, that they think they better not be alive because it's living that is that painful. But I think shame is also like that you feel as if you are so ashamed of having let everybody down, as May was saying, and you feel that you might as well not be here, because you are casting shame on a wider, you know, your family and your children, so I thought that was well worth just hearing and well worth understanding, and as you said to May, of course it's not our fault, you know, it feels like that, but obviously it isn't, and so we've got to recognize that is one of the things that, you know, prompts people to think of harming themselves and taking their lives.
Yeah, you know, it's when you say it in that way, and that's why I had to just touch in with May there and say, but you do know it's not your fault, right? Because we could still be getting through it, but still in our minds thinking that somehow we're to blame. And I have to be really clear in my right mind, and you would agree, Swagata would agree, and anybody listening to this would agree, especially anyone with lived experience of bipolar, that May should know, regardless of what what he's going through and we're all going through, it's not our fault. Bipolar is never our fault. It doesn't matter how it came or whatever.
Of course. If I may interrupt, just to make one point, as a woman from a South Asian community, this feeling that I've had with shame and mental health illness, like I said, it's going to sound drastic, but hear me out. It's almost similar to when you are shamed for being sexually abused or raped or molested. That is put squarely on your shoulders, and it tells you, as a woman, you are responsible for that. And that, of course, transcends cultures. But in our cultures, what I found, we are so great at socializing and keeping very strong social bonds. The one place it falls through is where we don't realize that us as human beings have limitations, and just accepting that instead of branding us as weak or the people who are responsible for our own source of misery. I find that incredible. Sorry to have interrupted you. I just wanted to say that.
No, thank you. Thank you for saying and expressing it yourself. And I think you're completely right. There's so much here that we're talking of. And I know when I come offline, I'm still going to be thinking about a lot of threads in these conversations. And that's why conversations like this are so important. It's a shame that they only happen, what feels for me, every once in a while. It's something that needs to constantly be happening somehow. And I don't know how we kind of get around that in future. But it's definitely something to think about. I want to, because we've got like 15 minutes left, I want to actually go to some of the Q&A questions from the community, if that's okay. I'm going to stick with Professor Femi for a moment. Somebody's written in and said, sometimes I feel like healthcare providers don't fully understand my cultural background, and this makes it harder to talk about my mental health struggles. What can I do to advocate for better understanding and communication with my doctors?
It's a difficult question to answer because of course we're living in the UK. It's a multicultural society, but every culture, every subculture has its own aspects to it. So it's very, very hard to say exactly what the clinicians ought to know or do. Because of course, I'm born in Lagos myself and lived in this country for 45 years or thereabouts. And I bring my own peculiarities into the country, and there'll be other people born in India or in the Caribbean or in other parts of Africa or China and so on. So you can see straight away that the clinician sitting in front of you, even if they themselves were, in my case, even if they themselves were Nigerian, they may not come from the same part of Nigeria as I do. And the cultures might be slightly different. So I just say that to underline the fact that it's a very, very complex ask to expect people to know in detail how to respond. And there are not enough of us, and we certainly don't want to be so segmented that we're asking only to see people who look like us or people who come from where we've come from. So I just wouldn't want to propagate that idea. But nonetheless, we want clinicians who are thoughtful, who are flexible, who recognize what they don't know, who continue to try to learn all through their clinical practice, and recognize that they ought to be adapting their practice to the person in front of them. So I give a simple example of what I mean. So if you take something like suicidal thinking and your approach, if you've got somebody who is Muslim in front of you, and you can't ask in a direct, ham-fisted sort of way whether they've been thinking of killing themselves, because the culture, the religion doesn't allow you to think like that. But all human beings sometimes are in situations where they feel like that and think like that. Therefore, you've got to ask it in a different sort of way. You've got to ask it in a roundabout way. So you've got to say, if Allah was to say that you've had enough time in the world now, how would you feel about that? So the person is able to then say, yes, I feel as if I've had enough life. So it's still the same expression. It's still talking about the same thing. So culture matters. Indeed, religion as part of culture matters. And we should be aware all the time, aware of how that impacts on how you should be interacting with people and how you should speak to them and how you should ask questions of them and so on. But please also, we have a little bit of just a little bit of thoughtfulness for the clinicians to say it's a mammoth task, because it's such a multicultural culture we live in, and it's very hard for one person to be aware of everybody's ways of living.
Yes.
But they've got to be alive to it.
Yes, I absolutely agree with that. It has to work with both sides. Obviously, we can't expect everybody to know everything about our culture. You know, if we just take ourselves, I'm Caribbean, you're African, of course I'm an African descendant. But even that, there's so many different levels.
Absolutely.
You as a Nigerian man, me as a St. Lucian of a second generation. So there is still so many differences in that. So how could your average Caucasian GP or clinician understand every single part of our culture? We don't even understand fully each other's cultures. So I think that's a really good point that you are making there. I think there has to be a bit of awareness on both sides. I know certainly from my side, when I was looking for help and diagnosis, I'd seen many different doctors, mostly Caucasian, but others who were Black, who were Indian, and they still didn't get it either. So that was the issue with me, that I saw a plethora of people, and it was like nobody seemed to identify this bipolar, which is strange. But then with that said, it goes within the average. You know, it could have taken me 10 to 15 years for the diagnosis, or I could have had bipolar a lot longer, and we just don't know. So it's really good points you're making. I want to ask May a question that's been sent in. May, somebody has written and said, suicide is often viewed as a taboo subject in my culture, but what role can community leaders and cultural organizations play in breaking this silence and helping with suicide prevention?
Yeah, I think just from my own experience of my community, they have topics for elderly people on things like dementia, and they have topics on things like arthritis or physical issues that people have. I think the community need to have events that are now specifically geared towards different types of mental health. And I think the community needs to start to hold these events to bring the awareness level up within the community. So, bipolar, anxiety, depression, these are topics typically the community shies away from because people are reluctant to come up and make a stand. But I think they need to nurture people and give them that environment to say, look, it's okay that you've got mental health. We want you to stand up and help others. But the community at the moment is because it's a shameful subject and people want to hide and not bring their family's reputation down. That's the problem. But I think communities do need to start to address this by holding these seminars, holding work, particular sessions. Our community, for example, does get together the older people in Leicester, for example, which is central then to the UK, and people travel to Leicester and they have a day of events, and they can have an event within that schedule to talk about mental health, and I think that will be very helpful for parents and also younger people within the community.
Yeah. Really good point. What's your heritage, May?
I was born in Bradford. I'm from Gujarat. My family's from Gujarat in India, and my dad moved here in the 1960s, and then I was born here. But yeah, they come from Gujarat. My father came from a village in the Gujarat, but he studied hard, and he went to Bombay or Mumbai University. And then because they were bringing skilled workers from India to the UK at that time, in order to service the textile and the wool industry, a lot of people moved into Yorkshire and Lancashire.
So that's how you ended up where you were.
That's correct. Yeah. So my father got a job as a color chemist in one of these textile halls, and he was mixing colors for textiles. But unfortunately, in the 80s, a lot of that work transferred to China, and therefore there was a decline in the industry. So all these Asian people in Lancashire and Yorkshire suddenly lost their jobs. Yeah, and then Bradford was one of the richest cities actually in the world or Europe back in the day. But as soon as that industry went down after Chinese exports increased, there was a lot of people who didn't.
That must have really affected many people's mental health. But yeah, it was never spoken about then because A, it wasn't by the B, and I'm talking about among all communities. It must have been a very, very tough time. Can I ask Swagata, somebody's written in, I feel like I'm facing a double stigma, both from having bipolar and being part of a minoritized ethnic community. How do you overcome the challenges that come with navigating these dual identities?
So, in my opinion, you fend for yourself first. Get this idea in your head that you are your biggest advocate. And if you want help, you need to navigate it. I've navigated the health system in India and the UK. Vastly different in many ways, not in others. So I have found one thing, that you need to be in the driving seat of making sure your health gets the kind of connection and attention that it needs from medical professionals. If you feel one doctor is not understanding you, ask to see a different one. Like you, Leah, I actually had questions about my diagnosis after I got diagnosed because I was stable for such a long time, and then I got pregnant and I needed to see perinatal psychiatrists, and they were like, you don't seem like bipolar. And I was like, well, you know, I'm really stable right now. And they said exactly the same things as they would to you, Leah. So I'm very insightful and articulate, and you're two together as a person.
As people with bipolar, that is part of, you know, bipolar is not all doom and gloom. There's a lot of what I found good that comes, or
high functioning, as they call it, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, and things like being self-aware is really important.
Exactly. In fact, I know two other bipolar people, and they're extremely articulate and well-spoken, and just like yourself, now I know that. So, you know, I just realized that if you're not getting the help from doctors, ask to see a different one, ask to see a different one, ask to see a different one. When this thing got really bad, where my current psychiatrist stopped treating me, and he asked me to stop taking my medication through my pregnancy, which made me really ill, I wrote to the clinical lead and said that, listen, I'm not going to get into a he said, she said situation, but I need to see a different person. And there's a lot more understanding now. I obviously substantiated that with some of the events that had transpired. And, you know, this person listened to me and said, okay, fine, you can see somebody else. So that is number one. And secondly, wherever you encounter challenges for your own sanity, find a different way first, and then you come back to build on it. So in my case, when I realized that nobody in my setting, in my country, in my culture is really understanding, because there's such a dearth of knowledge, I decided I'm going to go to and speak to people who've got an understanding. And that started with a counselor at my university, you know. It happened to be probably 70% were Caucasian, but there were Asian doctors who treated me who really understood, exactly like Dr. Femi said, that you will probably find people from your same culture either understand you better or worse. It depends. But, you know, I've had those experiences. And only when I felt safe and secure in my recovery, I've come back to my community, and I've started to plan a podcast that I'm releasing. I'm starting thinking of a foundation where, you know, I can, through the work of which I can actually make impact at the grassroots level. What May said, I'm thinking of going to temples and mosques and speaking to people and saying that, listen, I have no shame. I went through this. You are probably going through this all by yourself. You've told no one. But I want you to hear that I went through this, because at least that will make you feel less alone. You know? So that is what I would say. Find support elsewhere. And then if you feel the need to come and give back, do that then. But don't be limited by your options, is what I would say.
That's a really good point. And also don't overwhelm ourselves, because as well, what I feel certainly with bipolar, you know, we get so many amazing ideas. We want to do so much. And also we want to turn into positive all the bad that happened to us. And so the ideas and the meetings and the groups and, and it all could just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And actually we have to, in that, look after ourselves whilst we are still trying to do good. So again, you know, I love my work with Bipolar UK and all the work I do outside of that as well, in terms of mental health advocacy and campaigning. But I've also learned the hard way to recognize when I have to put a time out, and recognize when to say no. You know what, I shouldn't do that one. I'd love to do it, but I can't, because it's just going to be too much. Having boundaries. So, you know, unfortunately, we've got to end here, because we're about to go offline in a minute. But I just want to say thank you all so much for being here. May, thank you for taking the time out to share your story. You know, I really hope you keep going from strength to strength to strength. And I know it's a journey, but I hope you know that you are the pillar of your family, with or without bipolar, and you were still recognized and you were still loved. I don't need to meet your family to know that you are loved, and nobody is blaming you for having bipolar. I don't believe that for a minute. So, you know, God bless you, and I wish you well on this continued journey. And anytime you may need to reach out to somebody outside, there's the e-community, there's people like us in this community here, Bipolar UK. You know now that you're not doing this by yourself. So please.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Leah.
Thank you.
Group. So thank you so much. Swagata, thank you just for your honesty, your openness, just how you just spoken so eloquently and from the heart. I know that you would have gone through a lot yourself to get to this point now, and to watch you as a fierce woman, you know, speaking your truth and saying, this is how it's been for me and I'm going to help others. That has really warmed me as well, and it's inspired me. So thank you very much for taking the time. And Dr. Femi, what can I say? You are an absolute legend. You know, this guy did get the what is it? One of the highest accolades at the London College of Psychiatry. So, you know, this is one of the big guys in this field. So thank you so much, Professor Femi. It's absolutely an honor to be speaking with you again. And to everybody who has been listening today, I hope this conversation has helped. Of course, the e-community is there, bipolaruk.org. If you are feeling unwell or you need help, reach out to the crisis team. There's also the email info@bipolaruk.org.